Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I have been waiting to make this video for so long, but I've had to keep putting it off because I didn't want to make a video all about my motivations for getting the pump, why I want to go on the pump after being on like MDI for 16 years and get all excited about the ways that I think it's going to change my life for the better while I was still in the pump approval process, because I thought I would literally just jinx it and then my pump application wouldn't go through or something would go wrong. But then like 1.5, maybe 2 weeks ago, I finally found out that my pump application has been approved. So yeah, that was so exciting. I finally knew that I was definitely going to be getting a pump. And then I was like, okay, I decided I was going to film it today. And then this morning I got a call telling me that my pump appointment has finally been booked, which I am so excited for. It's on the 26th of July, so at the point of filming this video it's about 4.5 weeks away, but by the time this video like goes live it will probably be like nearer 2-ish weeks. So that is so exciting. It's coming around like quickly now, which like I've been waiting for like a whole year, so 1 more month to wait is like nothing. I am so excited. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video to kind of explain my motivations for wanting to get a pump, and also kind of why I didn't want to get a pump for so long. Like I said, I've been on MDI for 16 years. For anyone else who's maybe considering getting a pump but a bit nervous or not really sure if they want to take that leap, this was kind of my decision-making process to kind of come to the conclusion that yes, I do want to get a pump. And while I was deciding about this, I asked you guys on Instagram about your personal experiences with the pump, because I wanted to have information from people that aren't just like the medical providers or the pump manufacturers, and find out what it's actually like living with these different types of pump, and that really helped me come to the decision I came to. So I will be sharing those opinions with you at the end of the video. But yeah, I'm excited to just kind of share how I came to this decision. I didn't want to get a pump for a long time because my control for the last, I want to say like 4 or 5 years, was always pretty good. Like my HbA1c for that period of time was always between kind of 6.8 and 6.3, and when I was about 6.3, that's when I decided I wanted to get the pump. So that is still a really good HbA1c. Obviously my management I thought was fine, and I didn't see the need or the logic behind getting a pump attached to me, which I thought would be something that was really inconvenient and might perhaps inhibit some of my freedoms in certain ways, if my control was fine. And on top of that, I was also a bit nervous about the reliance on tech in case it goes wrong. So I use the Freestyle Libre CGM. If you don't know what a Libre is or a CGM, it's a constant glucose monitor, which I use instead of finger pricks to monitor my glucose 24/7. And this has been an absolute life changer for me, like made such positive gains in not only my like quality of life but also my diabetes management, and I'd say it works about 95% of the time, maybe even like closer to 97, 98, but that small percentage of the time is very inconvenient now that I am used to using the Libre and kind of rely on it. Like I can always obviously revert to finger pricks, but it is still inconvenient. I can only imagine that with a pump as something that is actually delivering your insulin, you rely on it a lot more. It's a lot more important to make sure that your insulin doses are 100% correct all of the time, and so if that tech fails, it's then potentially more dangerous and more inconvenient than just if like a glucose monitor fails. So that's one thing I was pretty nervous about. I was also strongly considering like exercising with a pump, because obviously you guys all know exercise is a massive part of my life. I do quite intense workouts. I do lots of weight training, like bashing around, like going between different pieces of equipment, throwing it around all over the place. And so I was nervous of having something attached to me that could be knocked off, or kind of having to find a place in like my workout outfits to wear the pump, and also just outfits in general, or like bikinis when you go to the beach. And like again, on that kind of topic of holidays, what's it like swimming with a pump? Is it going to stop me being able to enjoy a holiday properly? Because I am such a water baby. I love getting in and out of the water like 24/7 if I'm on holiday. So those were all kind of lifestyle things that I was a little bit nervous about with the pump. And then a few things happened that kind of made me gradually turn more towards the idea of a pump, and then ultimately kind of pushed me to want to make the decision. So the first thing was that my sensitivity changes and blood sugar swings around my period, so before, during and after my period, kept getting more and more dramatic, and I kept seeing bigger differences in my blood sugars during those periods of transition, around like my menstrual cycle, and it just became so difficult to manage on MDI. I do have a whole video about the strategy that I have been using while being on MDI, and it does work, but it's far from the best option for me when those sensitivity changes are so dramatic. The thing with MDI is once you take your basal insulin, depending which one you use, that's it for the next 12 to 24 hours. You have to make that one decision at that one point of the day, and then you can't take it back. If you give your insulin at the beginning of the day and you say come on your period an hour or two later, and then your insulin sensitivity skyrockets, and then fighting off hypos for the rest of the day because I can't take back any of that basal insulin that I've already taken. And yet there'd be days where I literally couldn't move, I couldn't clean, I couldn't even do work on my computer because I was just fighting off hypo after hypo. I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't do anything. And when that happens for kind of 2 to 3 days straight while you find out your new basal rates, and have to experiment, because for me also, each time I have a period, I never need the same Levemir. My sensitivity changes by different percentages or different amounts each time. So every time I have to have that period of experimentation for like 1 to 3 days before my period, and then again after my period, when my sensitivity goes back to normal. So having that every month, it adds up to a lot of time where you're just like useless, like I couldn't do anything. And I just thought with the pump it'd be so much easier because obviously you can change your basal rates as the day progresses. If I find out at like midday that I've got my period and my sensitivity has suddenly skyrocketed, I can then massively reduce my basal rates for the rest of the day, and the rest of the day can go ahead as normal. And so in that respect, I guess you just kind of have the luxury of being able to be reactive, whereas with MDI, especially around my period, I had to meticulously plan every single thing, which just isn't possible in real life. The next thing that happened was at the beginning of this year, I found out that I have background diabetic retinopathy, which is for me the beginning of diabetes complications beginning to show, despite my HbA1c being pretty good. I just wanted my control to be as tight and as accurate as possible to hopefully delay or prevent those eye problems from getting worse. And so obviously there are treatments, and I won't go into that diagnosis now because I do have a whole video about my diabetic retinopathy diagnosis. It just kind of kicked me up the bum, made me realise that I do really want to pump because you can be so much more precise with your management. So for example, on the pump that I'm going to be going on, I can bolus to the nearest 0.2 of a unit, whereas with MDI I can only do 0.5 of a unit. My basal settings I can change to the nearest 0.01 of a unit, which is absolutely mad. Like, that's so precise, and you can have different basal rates for different times of day. You can have temporary basals, exercise settings, you can split your bolus dose or do an extended bolus dose, and so you can match the insulin profile so much closer to your lifestyle and also the food you're going to be eating, without it having so much of a toll on my lifestyle and my mental health, like, because there's a lot of things that are more automatic. Like I said, like you can plug in a split bolus dose rather than having to do 2 separate injections, to a lot for my kind of slower digestion, and to be able to, yeah, like I said, match the insulin to when that food and the carbs release into your bloodstream. So having that much more meticulous control, yeah, without taking up so much headspace, is something I am majorly looking forward to. The third major thing, which is kind of linked to this, is that, like I said, I like to have as tight control as possible. I have a relatively small target range that I like to stay in, but that means that I'm doing so many injections every single day. Like, I would say I average at least kind of 10 injections per day, because I correct as soon as I start to creep even a little bit above my target range, because I want to stay as close to the 5s as possible. I also have to split a lot of my doses, like I just said, because I have a slow digestion. So like at dinner, instead of having 1 injection at dinner, I end up having 2 or even 3 injections for dinner, and that adds up a lot. And not only am I like literally running out of spaces to keep injecting, it's just like you're constantly thinking about when the next injection is going to be, whereas with the pump, being able to literally just push a button to give a bolus dose is something I'm majorly looking forward to. And then since deciding that I wanted to get a pump, there have been so many situations or things that have cropped up in my day-to-day life that I've just realised are going to be made so much easier with a pump. So for example, like I said, I'm very active, I like to weight train, but at the moment I have a bit of an issue where so I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you take your one basal injection at the beginning of the day and then it's just a steady profile for that basal insulin for the whole day. Whereas I find that after my exercise sessions, particularly after a heavy leg day, I'm struggling to not go hypo for the first few hours after the exercise, despite reducing my bolus doses, taking on carbs, all that kind of stuff. But then by the time it gets to the evening, I'm struggling to keep my blood sugar from going above range because that sensitivity has worn off, but I can't adjust my basal settings to accommodate that. So I'm doing a lot of injections in the evening, and just having to be so careful not to go high, whereas in the morning I have to be so careful not to go low. Whereas on a pump, obviously I could have different basal settings, so post-exercise I could be having a lot less basal insulin, and then in the evenings I can kick it back up again. So being able to do that is going to be such a weight off my shoulders. Also, things like being able to inject on the go, like this is going to be a dream. Like at the moment, I can't, if my blood sugars are in range after the gym, I can't inject my breakfast dose before I get home, because by the time I walk home, I will be hypo. Whereas if I wait until I get home and take my insulin, I then have to hang around for like 10 to 15 minutes before I can eat, even if I'm really hungry, because I need to do my pre-bolus so that I don't have a massive spike after I eat. Whereas if I have the pump, I can be, say, halfway home, give my breakfast bolus, and then eat as soon as I walk into the door. And I know that's kind of a luxury, like it's not a necessity. It's just going to be so nice to be able to have that option in my life. And equally, like the time of injecting, like the time it takes to inject, it's actually going to really add up for me, because like I said, I do about 10 injections a day. Say each injection only takes about 3 minutes by the time you've set up your pen, you've injected, you've like tried 3 different sites that all hurt until you find the site that is going to be acceptable to your insulin, then you wait for it to go in, then you take the needle off, blah blah blah. Let's say 3 minutes, right? 10 injections a day, that's 30 minutes. I'm going to get back a whole half an hour of my life, because to bolus I can just push a button. So yeah, those are the things that kind of made me finally get over myself and decide to just go for it with a pump. I think as well, in the back of my mind, I kind of thought that I was weak for choosing a pump, or that I wasn't a good enough diabetic to be able to cope on injections, and that getting a pump would kind of confirm that I was just like, yeah, not good enough at being diabetic. But that's all complete and utter rubbish. It's just like thoughts that you put in your head as a barrier to kind of taking that step, because it is a scary step to take. So if you're having any of those thoughts, just know it's not true. Any way you choose to manage your own diabetes is valid, and no one way of managing your diabetes is better, either literally or morally better than another way of managing it. And the sooner you can kind of get over your ego in that respect, the better, because not only is your diabetes going to thank you, but also so is your mental health, and so is your quality of life. So yeah, like I said at the beginning of this video, I did ask you guys on Instagram for your personal opinions and experiences of being on a pump. So I'm now going to share these for anyone else who is considering a pump, and yeah, things you might want to consider. I'm going to go through pros first, and then I'll talk about some cons. And these are from pump users. So firstly, pro, it's more automatic, more accurate, like I mentioned, because obviously your pump stores all of the algorithms in itself, and you can just plug in your carbs and your blood sugar and blah blah blah, and it will just spit out a number at you for your bolus dose and deliver it automatically. So yeah, in that respect, there's a lot less to kind of do, and a lot less to think about. Next, we have freedom with routine. You can be more flexible and make spur of the moment decisions without throwing your sugars out of whack. So the example that this lovely lady has given is that, for example, you can decide to have a lie-in or go to bed early without thinking about when you're going to do your basal insulin, because obviously we know On MDI, you do need to do your basal insulin at the same time every day as far as possible. So yeah, not even having to think about that and just sleep in till midday if I wanted to, if I'm like hungover or something, and not have to set an alarm to do my basal would be amazing. Next, we have fewer things to remember to bring with you. If you forget your insulin pens, doesn't matter because you've got your pump with you and you can just bolus as you go. So like if you go out for lunch, you've got your insulin, doesn't matter, it's attached to you. Next pro we have is greater accuracy in the moment. For example, you can vary your basal rates in response to changes you make or that are outside of your control. So this is kind of what I was saying about exercise. I can alter my basal rates depending on my sensitivity post-exercise, and also largely what I was saying about my periods. Like as soon as I notice my period, I can then change my basal settings. So for example, what Alana has written is that you can, if you decide partway through the day that it's going to be really active, you're going to go on a long walk, which you hadn't planned at the beginning, you can also have more flexibility with your routine and just change your basal rates rather than having to eat a load of hypo snacks constantly, because you've already had your like regular Levemir, whereas if you're going on a walk all afternoon, you probably wouldn't need as much basal insulin. On the flip side, if you have kind of planned for quite an active day, you end up getting ill or plans get cancelled, you can then adjust your basal rates accordingly. So yeah, these are some really good examples of situations where being able to be in the moment, flexible and reactive with your basal settings is going to be so important, and ultimately give you a lot of control back over certain situations that with MDI you'd have to kind of go through a lot of hoops in order to stay in target form. Next we have like splitting bolus doses, dual wave boluses or extended boluses. So for example, when you have high fat foods or takeaways, often we need to split our bolus dose for these because they have a very slow digestion rate. And so rather than having to do 2 injections, you can just plug it into your pump and tell it to do it over a certain period of time. And then equally for things like family occasions or buffets, where you might alternatively have to do several injections depending on how many courses you have. You don't know necessarily how many times you're going to go back for food. With the pump, again, it just eliminates those extra injections and you can just bolus more from the pump. Then also finally, a really good point on the pros is that it does open amazing opportunities for looping. If that is something you're thinking of doing, if you don't know what looping is, it's where you have a CGM that talks to your pump and acts like an artificial pancreas. So I won't be doing looping, and I'm going to explain in the video where I say how I decided which insulin pump to choose. I'm going to explain why I won't be looping straight away, but yeah, that is also something very important to note. If that's something you want to do, you're going to need a pump for that. So having said that, I'm going to move on to some of the cons that pump users have expressed to me and things that I considered before like making my decision to go onto the pump. So firstly, we have clothing being a bit awkward. So sometimes if you have a tubed pump, finding somewhere, for example, on a bodycon dress to then store the pump is tricky. Now there obviously are solutions to this. Loads of places sell like pump holders, there are clips you can get, but if you're kind of nervous about your showing off your devices and you're not so confident with that, that can be something that's tricky to deal with, because obviously there is a device attached to you 24/7 that you can't take off, and obviously pumps are a bit chunkier than just your average kind of CGM like a Libra or a Dexcom. So yeah, working it around outfits can be tricky, and although you may think like, oh, that's a silly reason not to get a pump, it's just aesthetics, like why put aesthetics in front of your health, it is a very real concern for a lot of people, and I just want to share that yes, pump users do feel that concern, but there's always solutions, like I said, like belts, clips. Next we have site changes being a bit of a pain because they do take a few minutes. At the beginning they're a bit slower, but then you get used to them. You can do them in your sleep. I wouldn't recommend, but yeah, I imagine that it's similar to the Libra. Once you know what you're doing, it gets a lot quicker, you're much more efficient at the process. We have some niggly little things that can be a bit inconvenient. So for example, getting the wire stuck on doorknobs, and then it can pull out the cannula, which can be sore and also frustrating because you have to then redo your infusion site. But the solution to that is just to make sure the wire is tucked in. So basically, just don't be a moron. No, I'm joking, but just be aware of, if you have a tubed pump, where the wires are at all times, and yeah, having clothing that you can tuck the wires away. And then next we have lying on the pump in bed. So it can apparently get take a bit of getting used to have the pump on in bed. You can either pop it in the bottom of pyjama shorts, you can just leave it lying on the bed, and if you just roll on it, then it will just wake you up, and then you just move it and it's fine. I've heard some people tuck it under the pillow, so yeah, it is one of those other things that takes a bit of getting used to, like everything else does, but it doesn't disturb your sleep in general. And then the next thing we have is a consideration for showering / swimming. So she says sometimes it's annoying to have to think about doing something extra before having a shower or swimming or just getting in water. But you basically just have to take your pump off before getting in the shower or the pool, unless you have an Omnipod. Those waterproof, I believe. Don't take my word on that, check with the manufacturer, but I believe Omnipods are waterproof. Yeah, a lot of these have come from Alana because she's amazing, and she says, yeah, it does take a bit of getting used to, like everything else, and you generally do have to plan to get in water. If it's away from your own house, for example, bringing a pump clip so you're ready to get in the pool. I imagine to like clip your pump onto your bikini, or to like sort out your infusion site. Obviously I don't have a pump yet, so I don't know the logistics exactly. And then you also have to be aware of having the pump off for a long period of time, because obviously it is going to be delivering your basal dose, so you're going to have to work out a way of still getting your insulin while you are away from your pump in the water. But yeah, Alana says, so she surfs, and when she takes her pump off for a long period of time during that, either she just burns through the energy anyway, that she wouldn't need the insulin because the surfing is quite active, or if it's a quieter day, then she just has some bolus insulin before she goes and takes the pump off, so that kind of covers the basal that would normally be going round. So yeah, those are some fairly, I would say, comprehensive pros and cons from pump users, and things to consider before deciding, like, is it going to fit in with your lifestyle, which kind of diabetes management aspects could be beneficial to you, is it worth it to you to change, do you think you're going to get real benefit from it, and obviously, having said all of this, you then need to actually check if you can get funding. And like I said, I am going to do a video all about my process, the process of getting funding in the UK. I do appreciate that a pump is probably on the wish list for a lot of people who simply can't access it, which I just think is absolute madness. But yeah, that's beside the point. These are just some things I wanted to share with you that you may want to consider if you are nervous about getting a pump, or just like, yeah, doing some research. And then also on top of that, I know there are like differences between a tubed pump and a patch pump, and so many different types of pump. So I'm also going to film a video about how I decided which pump I'm going to get. In that video, I will share which pump I'm getting, and yeah, also explain some of the differences between some of the different types of pump and the main pump that are available here in the UK, so kind of Omnipod, Roche, Tandem, those kind of things. But yeah, that is all coming up very soon. Make sure you're subscribed if you want to see the rest of the pump content. I promise if you're not interested in pumps as well, my channel isn't just going to suddenly turn into like a step-by-step how-to guide on pumps. I will also be doing lots of other diabetes topics too. But yeah, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it gave you a bit of a flavour into the pump world, and I am so excited to be starting my pump journey. But yeah, have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye!